Well, that's a good question. Wow, thank you. Um, for what I understand the question to be is bodhicitta necessary? And does bodhicitta represent um, something that is unique to Buddhism? Wow, the answer to both of these questions are yes and no. What did you have? No, okay, all right. No, the bodhicitta is an interesting concept. It's the idea that I will become enlightened for the benefit of all, which is essentially the bodhisattva vow. That's what the bodhisattva vow is trying to get to. And the way the bodhisattva vow is worded, it's asking you to do 4 or 5 impossible things um, every day, every moment of your life. And that's not quite the way it works. If we're going to become enlightened for the benefit of all, the first thing that we have to realize, or one thing that we do realize during that practice, is that I am the all. Because we go right back to what did Buddha describe as the all? It's in the Samyutta Nikaya. It's a sutta called the Sabha Sutta, the All Sutra in English, or the teaching of the all. And what is the all? The all is what we see, what we're conscious of seeing, and how we interpret that seeing. And the same holds true for hearing, for tasting, for smelling, for touching, for thinking. Remember, thinking is the sixth sense. It is not an independent act. And when we talk about these 6 senses and our relationship to the world, we find that we're actually creating this world. We're creating the world that we're experiencing. And this is what Buddha is talking about throughout the entire Pali Canon, is our existential experience, even suffering, dukkha, is not uh, is not about pain. We're going to experience pain just because we're alive. That's it. Birth is painful. Maturing is painful. Getting your teeth pulled is painful. Having a pimple on your butt is painful. Having a pimple on your face when you're 17 and going to the senior prom is very painful. There are a lot of things that are painful, being with people you don't like, being without the people you love. These things are all painful, but are they suffering? Are they dukkha? Yes, they're dukkha in a sense. They're dukkha in the sense of how we respond to them. And this is the really interesting thing about Buddhism. It's talking about existential suffering. The suffering that we experience just because we're alive. Just because we're alive, we suffer. We experience dukkha. Why? Because we're ordinary people. We're focused in on ourselves. And there are many, many cultures which practice bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, excuse me. Did I say bodhicitta? Oh my God. They practice bodhicitta within the context of their culture. Native Americans, for instance, had very little concept of a self except in relationship to their people. And in the Pali Canon, or Pali, as they say in Great Britain, but we say Pali, and well, actually we say Pali. It's Pali is the correct pronunciation. the long A is not an A sound, it's a extended sound. I bet you've always wanted to know that. Anyway, so we in Native American cultures, there's no concept of an individual apart from his community. And in Mahayana Buddhism, Bodhicitta represents the same idea. And who is my community? Well, they're my immediate family. They're my community, the people that live in my building, the people that live on my block, the people that live in my town, the people that live in my country, the people that live throughout the world. These are my people. But it goes further than that in Mahayana and in indigenous religion here in the United States, or throughout the Western world. And I think it's safe to say that it goes through any wilderness tradition, what we like to call shamanic traditions today. And Buddhism is a wilderness tradition, by the way. The Buddha became the Buddha by practicing the path of the shamana. That's where our word shaman comes from. The Buddha was a shaman. He practiced shamana and then combined the shamanic practice with the wisdom tradition. And that's how we get Dharma, Buddha Dharma. But this community extends beyond people. It extends to animals, not just our pets, not just stray dogs and stray kitties. It extends to all animal life. It extends to all vegetable life, even the plankton in the ocean. It extends to, and the algae at the bottom of a lake. It extends to rocks and mountains. This Mala is a sentient being. It is being sentient. Everything has a consciousness of some kind. In the West, psychologists are very materialistic. It is true. Psychology, which started out as this wonderful philosophy of the workings of the human mind, somehow got trapped into materialism. Physics, on the other hand, which started out very materialistic, broke out of that trap and is becoming more and more what we would call spiritual. Quantum physics and quantum mechanics are analogous and very, very similar in teaching to the Abhidhamma, to the Avatamsaka Sutra in Mahayana, to the wisdom, the Prajnaparamita literature in Mahayana. Very, very similar to what we find in the Samyutta Nikaya. Very, very similar to what we find in most indigenous religions. That we live in stacked universes. That's what string theory says. That's what the American Indians have been teaching for thousands of years. The Buddha refers to these as realms. Well, these realms are other dimensions of existence. And because we're all sentient beings, we can communicate on these different levels. We can communicate with every other sentient being. It's true. We can. And the more one meditates, the more one lives within the context of bodhicitta, the more one experiences this. Now, does that mean that today we all go out and become vegetarian? No, that would be nonsense. People worry about the way pigs are treated at farms, agricultural complexes. Yes, I do too. I do worry about that sometimes. I think it's a terrible shame that this is the way we treat our brothers and sisters, other sentient beings. You never thought of a pig as your brother or your sister, but they are. We treat animals terribly, unless they're our pets and they're cute and they're pretty. Then we treat them okay. We have no qualms swatting a mosquito. We have no qualms about stepping on a spider or chopping the head off a snake just because it's there, because we're terrified of this thing. We're terrified of things that have less than 2 legs and more than 4. We don't want to be around them. And if their jaws go sideways, then they become called a pest. We would normally call those insects. So we are very, very compartmentalizing when it comes to what we consider part of our family. Well, in Buddhism, with the idea of bodhicitta, you can't be that discriminating. You're either practicing bodhicitta or you're not practicing bodhicitta. If you're going to be worried about the way a cow, a pig, or a chicken, or a turkey, or whatever is being treated before it gets slaughtered for your dinner table, and that's why you're eating vegetarian food, why aren't you worried about the way lettuce is treated? Or how baby carrots are ripped out of the ground? Have you ever heard the cries of 100,000 baby carrots being torn out of the earth? No, because we don't pay attention to that. They're carrots, they don't feel anything. That's nonsense. Evidence is, scientific evidence is, that plants feel just as any other sentient being feels. What about a rock? Or a mala? Well, okay, rocks and malas are just like us. They too have consciousness. They too feel. They are, this mala is a sentient being in its entirety, see? Mala, but each individual bead or disc, each individual tiger eye, each individual thread of string, including the one of the balls. I got 2 balls at the end of my mala. All of them are composed of other sentient beings, just as the human is composed of many sentient beings. I'm composed of many minds. I am composed of many cells, which make up many organs. That's the whole thing behind the concept of being an organism. I am a living organism because I am made up of a lot of living things, and each one of those living things has a consciousness. I can be in touch with every cell in my body. This is part of the Mahamudra practice that we do on Monday nights, is being in touch with what is really there, not what we imagine to be there. We start out very, very slow and work ourselves up very, very big. So that answers that question. Is bodhicitta important? Of course it is. You can't become a Buddha without it. Well, okay, we're already Buddhas, but we can't recognize that Buddha without it. So in the morning when I get up, I do my little chant in front of the altar. I light my candle and incense. I do the Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahanto Samasambuddhasa 3 times. I do the refuge, and I do the Bodhicitta prayer. And I have to think to myself, what is it that I should do if I am enlightened? How do I demonstrate my enlightenment today? This too is bodhicitta, because I have to be enlightened for the benefit of all, or it doesn't work. Buddhism just doesn't work without it. Well, if I am going to become enlightened for the benefit of all living beings, all sentient beings, then I have to be respectful and kind to them. And that goes for my significant others. I have 2 cats and a wife. I have to do that for the benefit of my computer, the benefit of my neighbor, the benefit of my car, the benefit of the gas pump when I'm pumping gas. There are a lot of sentient beings I have to do things in benefit for. I have to treat respectfully. When I eat my dinner, because I generally only eat 1 meal a day. It's usually huge, but I eat 1 meal a day. I have to be respectful of the animal that meat used to be. I have to be respectful of the vegetables that used to be alive, because they still have consciousness. There is still a consciousness existent in that slab of meat. Bacon is extraordinarily conscious, a very high conscious being. I love bacon. Treat that with a great deal of respect. And pork chops and ham, ribeye steak. But I also have to treat lettuce and salad dressing and tomatoes with respect, because they too are sentient beings. So this is the practice of bodhicitta, recognizing the sentience of all beings. Well, what does this mean in the context of emptiness? In the context of emptiness, it's all one anyway. If I'm treating a stick of celery with respect because it's a sentient being, who has made that sentient? I did. It's a matter of sentient being and being sentient. I have to be feeling something toward that feeling being. I have to liberate all sentient beings. I can do that. I have to free them from my preconceptions, my judgments, my discriminations, my false views, and I have set them free. Because I cannot make them enlightened. And that's the way we take it, because we have a Judeo-Christian background, which is neither Jewish nor Christian half the time. And we have to consider that. In the United States, when the United States was colonized by oppressive Euro-Christians, an interesting thing happened. Besides the stealing of the land and the mass genocide that we experienced in this country, that our ancestors created. They also tried to erase the religion, and they imposed upon the people that lived here the concept of the supremacy of the self. This is the worst crime against humanity I can imagine. Because not only did the European Christian do that in the United States, they also did it in Asia. They took away the sense of oneness and imposed a sense of individuality upon it. In one of Dostoevsky's books, I wish I could remember which one, there was an interesting line there that said, so this person was guilty of rabid individualism. Well, that's what Euro-Christianity imposed upon indigenous peoples worldwide. It imposed it upon its own people. The early Germanic, before the hundreds of years of conflict between the Germans and the Christian church and the Lithuanians and the Christian church. Lithuania didn't become Christian until 1492. They were the last pagan nation in Europe, and they were an empire, huge empire. We don't get taught about that because they weren't Christian. But in all indigenous religions, and in Buddhism alike, it's about the community. What am I doing to benefit the community? Not what I am doing to help myself. Self-help was not a goal in Buddhism. It is a method to help others. The idea of self-help to benefit me doesn't resonate within Buddha Dharma. Being healthy because it makes me feel good doesn't resonate in Buddhism. If I want to be healed of a disease, the motivation for that healing should not be because I feel like crap and I want to feel better. It has to be that I feel like crap, and because of that, I cannot help others. My pain is distorting my view. And that's why the fifth precept is in there too, to avoid intoxicants and the results of being intoxicated. Why? Because the first thing that is affected with any intoxicant, whether it be alcohol, drugs, my own ego, attachments and aversions, those are intoxicants. The first thing affected is my judgment. I can no longer think clearly. And because I cannot think clearly, my response time becomes very, very slowed down. I cannot benefit others because I'm inebriated, I'm intoxicated with my own foolishness. And then the next thing Euro-Christianity did to these indigenous peoples, including Buddhists, was impose words on us that do not appear in the Pali Canon, or the Mahayana Canon, or even the Vajrayana Canon. Words like God. There's no concept of God in Buddhism. There was no concept of God in most of the native religions in the United States or in Asia. There was no concept of two opposing forces, good versus evil. That didn't exist. The idea of evil itself didn't exist because evil is a value judgment. Give you an example. Hitler was a horrible, evil person. Unless you were a Nazi or a white supremacist, then he's a pretty good guy. His mother liked him. His dog loved him. Eva Braun certainly had the hots for him. Hitler was a sex symbol. Jesus Christ was a pretty good guy, unless you happen to be a Pharisee, or a Sadducee, or a scribe, or somebody he offended when he cleansed the temple, which was a radical act of anger and violence. So sometimes, and also a violation of certain people's legal and civil rights in Israel at that time. So evil and good, or judgment call. We usually say something is bad because we don't like it. If we liked it, it's good. And we have to see through those kinds of things. And the practice of Bodhicitta helps us to do that. It helps us to see the equality of all living things. Because as the Buddha says in the Dhammapada, every living thing wants to be happy. They want to avoid pain, suffering, and death so they can be happy. And this is where the Dalai Lama gets his strange idea about the goal of Buddhism is to be happy. The goal of Buddhism is to understand. And in that understanding, happiness results. Happiness is not the goal. Understanding is the goal. We have to understand. Otherwise, we run around in confusion. And there's enough confusion in the world. We don't have to add to it. That's silly. Anything else?